The Romanesque period is considered the first great European epoch of art after the fall of Roman Empire. The general impression given by Romanesque architecture in both ecclesiastical and secular buildings is one of the massive solidity and strength. In contrast with both the preceding Roman and later Gothic architecture, in which the load-bearing structural members are or appear to be columns, pilasters, and arches, Roman architecture, in common with Byzantine architecture, relies upon its walls or sections of walls called piers. The Romanesque style describes the architecture of Europe that emerged during the Dark Ages and lasted until the late 10th century, when it evolved into the Gothic style during the 12th century. The period of art that follows the Romanesque is the Gothic style, with its characteristic pointed arches. It is for this reason that monuments of this transactional period often combines both the art features into one piece of architecture. Romanesque appears to be a continuation of a Roman tradition of building. The style was identifiable medieval and did not yet entail the Gothic, but maintained the rounded Roman arc along with several other distinguishable characteristics. Its thick walls, rounded arches, sturdy piers to support the arches, large towers, and decorative arcading characterize Romanesque architecture. Buildings typically have clearly defined forms and often have regular and symmetrical plans. The general architectural character is rich in the multiplication of circular and octagonal turrets, in conjunction with polygonal domes and the use of arcaded galleries under the eaves. The most richly ornamented parts are the doorways and capitals, which are bold and effective in execution. Walls. The church has walls that are massively thick with few openings. Building material differ across Europe depending upon the local stone and building traditions. Arches and openings. In Romanesque architecture, arches are semicircular. Small windows adorn the building, usually in semicircular shape as well. Doorways are also typically enclosed by a semicircular arch. Buttresses. Buttresses in Romanesque architecture are not a highly significant feature as they are in Gothic architecture because of the massive nature of Romanesque walls. Romanesque buttresses are generally of flat square profile and do not go much higher above the wall. Towers. Towers were an important feature of Romanesque architecture, especially churches, and many are still standing today. They take a variety of shapes depending on the country. A different number of towers may be in common. In the plan, the nave and aisles are vaulted in square bays, one vaulting bay of the nave being equal to the two of the aisles. Roof. Along with the walls, timber roofs were also employed for large spans. Tower roof and spires of curious form are a special feature of this style. Column. The nave arcade were generally constructed of square piers with half column attached, and thin elimination of piers and column is a favorite German feature.
Worms Cathedral. Worms Cathedral is a Romanesque cross basilica built in the 11th and 12th centuries. In accordance with its status as an imperial cathedral, it was consecrated in 1018 in the presence of the emperor. However, parts of the cathedral collapsed as nearly as 2 years later and building had to be restarted. The cathedral was consecrated once more in 1110. The size of the cathedral is 110 meter into 27 meter. The interior measurement is 36 meter, including the transept, which is close to the west end. The height in the nave is around 26 meter and 40 meter below the dome. History of Worms Cathedral. The origins of Worms Cathedral go back to early Christian times. The first bishop of Worms was Berthulf in 614 AD. His cathedral was much smaller than the present one. Under Burchard, the most notable bishop of Worms, a new Romanesque cathedral was built on the site. It had similar measurements to today's cathedral, and some of the original parts survive. The cathedral was a burial place for the Salian royal family, who had a castle in Worms well into the 11th century. These can still be seen in the crypt. A century later, B.Arch's building was replaced by the present cathedral, an even more splendid high Romanesque structure. The east section was the first part to be built in 1125 to 44. The nave was constructed in 1160 to 70 and the chancel was mostly completed by 1181. When the cathedral was consecrated, the west end was the last to be built at the end of the 12th century. During the Middle Ages, numerous visits from the emperor and many important events, some with political consequences, took place in the cathedral and its surroundings. Around 1300, the Nicholas Chapel in the cathedral was replaced with the Gothic chapel and the south portal was recarved in an impressive Gothic style. A late Gothic cloister was carved with scenes from the life of Jesus around the end of the 15th century. These now stand in the north nave. In the late 17th century, after the town was badly damaged during the wars against the French, a Baroque high altar by Balthazar Neumann was added to the cathedral. This is the plan of the Worms Cathedral. The plan of Worms is based on a nave plus two aisles, both eastern and western choirs. One transept near the eastern apse with an impressive crossing tower, a small tower above the western choir, and four cylindrical corner towers. All these architectural elements of the cathedral create a harmonious ensemble, and it projects a majestic skyline over the Rhine. The present cathedral was constructed mostly between 1125 and 1181 over the footprint of an earlier cathedral that had been built a century earlier by Bishop Burchard, an important historical figure. The cathedral is built of red sandstone, material also used as spear and mains that visually ties the three casedomes. The main entrance. One notable Gothic addition in the main entrance, the Soot Portal, which is a veritable Bible in stone. Unusually and thankfully, the sculptures from the former Romanesque portal were preserved on the wall immediately inside. On the north side is the Castle Portal, where according to the German epic, Kriemhild and her sister-in-law, Brunhild, had a quarrel about who had the right to enter the portal first, leading eventually to the murder of Siegfried and the collapse of Burgundy. Inside the oldest section in the east choir, which became the prototype for a distinctive trick of local architecture, the walls are straight on the outside but rounded inside. The arcades are decorated with fearsome lion statues to frighten off the devil. Look for the figures of a workman with a monkey on his shoulder. This is probably a self-portrait of the master mason, the workman, not the monkey. The highly decorative west choir is the culmination of the building program towards the end of the 12th century. It includes splendid examples of typical Romanesque features, including rose windows, zigzag arcades, and rich moldings. This is the south portal. The south transept, mere 5 meters away from the high altar directly inside, shows a modest yet meticulous positioned doorway and asymmetrically located arched opening and a round window. The gable has what is known as Lombard molding. This is the nave. The nave was built between 1160 and 1170, and the chancel at the far end of the photograph was completed in 1181 when the cathedral was consecrated. The plan of the nave is organized as 5 square bays as seen above the cross vaulting. The aisles are half as wide as the nave, and therefore north and south aisles have 10 smaller square bays each. The procession of alternating major and minor piers along the length of the nave is slow moving and contemplative. Chancel. The high altar was designed by Balthazar Neumann, one of the most important architects of the 18th century in Germany. The gilded wood and marble Baroque altar is a powerful work of art in itself, holding forth in the strong frame of the Romanesque architecture of the Worms Cathedral. The eastern apse, seen beyond the altar, was the earliest part of the cathedral, constructed from 1125 to 1144. Nave arcades and clerestory. This illustrates the nave elevation scheme well. The major piers with half-round pilasters over rectangular projection continue all the way to the springing of the main arches and cross ribs for the vaulting, while the minor piers receives the arches for the clerestory windows and blind arcades underneath. This is the nave to western choir. The western choir was built the last at around the end of the 12th century. The interior view of the choir gives a clue to the dynamic sculptural massing that projects beyond the main volume of the nave on the exterior. One can only marvel at the master builder's ingenuity in designing the rose window and the surrounding smaller windows, as well as the mason's meticulous workmanship in chiseling the precise moldings. Now, these are the different angles of the Worms Cathedral which we can see, and then these are the drawings of the Worms Cathedral in which we can see the different parts of the cathedral drawn, like western apse, nave bay, transverse section, nave pier, exterior from northeast side, cornice, external angle choir, jamb of north doorway. Jamb of north doorway.
St. Hedwig's Cathedral is a Catholic church in the historic center of Berlin which is dedicated to Hedwig of Cecilia. It was built in the 18th century following a request from local parishioners to King Frederick II. He donated the land on which the church was dedicated to the patron of Cecilia and Brandenburg, St. Hedwig of Cecilia. It was the first Catholic church built in Prussia after the Reformation. The building was designed by George Wenceslas von and modeled after the Pantheon in Rome. Construction started in 1747 but was interrupted and delayed several times by economic problems. It was not opened until 1st November 1773 when the king's friend Igisi, the Bishop of Warmia, officiated at the cathedral's consecration. The cathedral was severely damaged by a light bombing in an air raid on 1st March 1943. Only the damaged shell of the building was left standing. Reconstruction started in 1952 and on 1st November 1963, All Saints' Day, the new high altar was consecrated by the Bishop of Berlin. Between 1949 and 1990, St. Hedwig was in East Berlin under the control of East German government. The cathedral closed for major renovations on 1st September 2018. The style of architecture of the original cathedral was Baroque, and then after reconstruction it was post-war modernization. It was directed northwest and it was also completed in 1887 and the reconstruction completed in 1963. The church's interior is a modern version as much of it was destroyed during the war. The restoration under Hans replaced the original dome with a new one reinforced with concrete. Other alterations from 1952 to 1963 included a stairways to the crypt, a modern interior and 8 new chapels. The reliefs in the fronts and between the portal columns were late 19th century additions. While St. Hedwig's Cathedral is also the seat of Archbishop of Berlin and the most important Catholic sacral building in the city.
I'll be talking about the Münchner Dome. This church is located in Munich, Germany. This cathedral is a sign of unity and faith. The original architect of the church, John von Halsbach, had installed a star vault. It was destroyed by the bombing raids in World War II. This is the plan of the church. The yellow one is the plan of the church between 12th to 14th century. The red one is after the renovations of World War II. This is a sketch by the architect. On the floor in the entrance area under the choir, the stone-carved imprint of a human foot can be seen in the pavement. It's the devil's foot. The builder had bet the devil for his soul that no window could be seen in the church. When the church was almost done, the devil sneaked in and laughed out loud, as a church without windows will not be of much use. But as he took a step further, he saw a lot of windows and realized he was the victim of perspective. The machine clock is a clock in the choir which gives them the accurate time. Every choir stall had a clock since the Middle Ages. The overall effect of the interior is determined by light and color. The walls, the white pillars, and the colored glasses in particular determine the refraction of light in the room. The position of the dome is shown in the plan. The former high altar painting of the Assumption by Peter Candid, completed in 1620, is located above the scarcity portal of the north wall. The altarpiece shows the Assumption of Mary into heaven and Jesus holding a crown over Mary's head. The two striking towers are the symbols of the city of Munich. The so-called Weldenhoven were based on the middle of the dome of the rock in Jerusalem. Even when the cathedral was badly damaged by air raids during Second World War, the towers remained intact. The church also houses a four-organ for the choir. This is a picture of the choir. The church also has a beautiful glass window. The full-colored glazing contributes to the atmosphere of the room. The position is also shown.
The Cathedral of St. Paul is the attractively unique Cathedral of Munster, capital of the Westphalia region in northwest Germany. Built in the transitional style of the early 13th century, the cathedral has a west porch filled with medieval sculptures and a unique nave with only two ultra-wide bays. The Cathedral of Munster was founded by Ludger, who was sent out by Charles Magny in 793 as part of the Emperor's comprehensive plan. A fine exterior view of Munster Cathedral can be had from the spacious plaza on its south side, which hosts a market on Wednesdays and Saturdays. The cathedral has a relatively short nave but an impressive overall size thanks to the massive westwork with twin towers, transepts at the east, west, and projecting choir with the ambulatory and radiating chapels. The cloisters, chapter house, vestry, and lady chapel extend from the north side. The most famous feature of Munster Cathedral's interior is the magnificent astronomical clock made in 1540 till 43. Not surprisingly, for such a complex and beautiful machine. The beautifully painted clock face features the symbols of the four evangelists in the corners. Each holds a scroll with the Latin verse that mentions aspects of the clock while also representing four phases in the life of Christ. A few steps away from clock is the specular chapel of Clemens August, Cardinal Walgaren, the Lion of Munster. A memorial stone commemorates this event.
Maria Latch Abbey is a Benedictine abbey situated on the southwestern shore of the Lacher Sea, Lake Lach, near Andernach in the Eifel region of the Rhineland-Palatinate in Germany. The abbey was built in the 11th-12th centuries and was originally known as Abbey Lach until 1862 when the Jesuits called it the Maria. The Abbey Church of Maria Latch is considered a masterpiece of German Romanesque architecture with its multiple towers, large westwork with arcade gallery and unique west porch. The east end has a round apse flanked by twin square towers. Over the transept crossing is a board cupola with cone-shaped roof. The interior is quite dark with sunlight emitted only through small Romanesque windows high in the nave and in the two sides of the aisle. When assisted by modern chandeliers, it lights up. Stained glass art can be seen on the windows of the abbey. We can also see a big library in the campus of the abbey. Vintage detailed engraving can be seen on the capitals of the columns in Maria Latch Abbey. The floor plan is in the shape of a cross, in which arcades, columns, the atrium, aisle, nave, transept and the apse are shown. In the elevation, the abbey, multiple towers with conical roof and arch openings can be seen. The Maria Latch Abbey will always be an exception in the history of Romanesque architecture.
Beaufort's Cathedral, also known as St. Mary's Cathedral, is the largest and the oldest church building in the Thuringen city of Beaufort, central Germany. The site of present cathedral has been location of many other Christian buildings, for example a Romanesque basilica and a church hall. In 742, Saint Boniface erected a church on the mount where Beaufort Cathedral is now sited. In the mid-12th century, the foundation of original church were used for Romanesque basilica. In the early 14th century, the mound was enlarged to make a room for St. Mary's Cathedral. The church was originally Romanesque but experienced significant conversion in the Gothic period. The building has many notable architecture features, including the stained glass windows and the interior furnishing. The center sphere of cathedral three-tower houses the Mary Gloria, which at the time of its casting by Great in 1497 was the world's largest free swing bell. It is the largest surviving medieval bell in the world, and it is known for its purity of its stone. Many rare and rich furnishing and sculpture, including the tomb of Gigamus Count Von, accompanied by both of his wife, a stucco Etler, and a bronze candelabra antiquity called Wolfram, the oldest freestanding castwork in Germany, and out on the porch several statues of the wise and foolish virgins.
The High Cathedral of St. Peter in Trier, or Trier Cathedral, is a Roman Catholic cathedral in Trier, Germany. It is the oldest church in Germany and the largest religious structure in Trier, notably for its long lifespan and grand design. The Trier Cathedral treasury contains an important collection of the Christian art. In 1986, the church was listed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The cathedral was commissioned by Emperor Constantine the Great and built on top of a palace of Saint Helen, his mother. Bishop Maximin is said to have coordinated the construction of this cathedral, which at that time was the grandest structure in the west outside Rome. The 4th century church was left in ruins by the Franks but rebuilt. It was again destroyed by the Vikings in 882. Large sections of Roman brickwork are visible on the north facade. The imposing westwork of Trier Cathedral consists of 5 symmetrical sections and is type of Romanesque architecture under the Salian emperors. The westwork was started by Popo von Babenberg and completed by Eberhard. Its 4 towers are more or less symmetrically placed on both sides of the western apse. The interior measures 112.5 by 41 meters. It consists of 3 largely Romanesque naves with Gothic vaulting. The Roman structure is difficult to read on the inside, but its basic rectangular form may be still recognized in the 3 easternmost bay of the nave. The 4 original columns were reused in the 11th century but changed into cruciform piers. The west choir is also decorated in the style of German Baroque, and so are the chapels of Our Lady and the Holy Sacrament. And most of the altars in the church